Hello and welcome. My name is Dr. Raj Persaud. I'm a consultant psychiatrist. I'm based in private practice in Harley Street. And I'm delighted to be joined today with Jane. And you're going to pronounce your surname for us, Jane, because I always get it wrong. What is it again?
It's Janse Van Rensburg.
Janse Van Rensburg. Is that right?
Janse Van Rensburg.
Yes. Okay. It's a very, very posh name.
Typical
Posh
South
name.
African.
Yeah, very posh name. So I'm delighted to have her back on the show again, because Jane gave a fantastic interview last time. First of all, talking a bit about her own experiences of addiction. You spoke very poignantly and hilariously on many occasions about what happened to you in terms of how you got into, if we can describe it as getting into addictions. But I want to now talk a little bit more about how you brought those experiences to bear in being the therapist that you are and the kind of work you do at this ultra impressive and exclusive clinic you work in South Africa. So first of all, tell us about the kind of clients you see. Tell us a bit about the kind of stories they bring in terms of the kind of patients that you see. What's happened to them before? Give us some examples of stories they tell about their lives.
Okay, Dr. Raj, we obviously have a very holistic approach. So we do allow phones and laptops, or, because we've got a lot of business people coming in. Whereas I don't know how it works where you are, but a lot of rehabilitation centers in South Africa, they don't allow the use of phones. You get phone calls twice a week. So we've got a different sort of clientele because they might still need to do a bit of work. But basically it's just, some of them are burnout and some of them have just really worked really hard. And, you get your bit of cocaine that sneaks in there and some alcohol that sneaks in there and a few things like that, I think, to cope with perhaps the pressures of being in the high-powered world that they actually are in.
Okay. And usually there's been a disaster, though, hasn't there? Which is why they end up, because most addicts don't think they've got a problem until some disaster occurs. Is that right?
Yes. I think what the difference is with the clients we have is that they've made the choice themselves. So there was no mom said I need to go, dad said I need to go. It's basically they've come to the point where they've realized that I kind of need help. So best I get myself booked in some way. So I think for us, that's quite an honor and a privilege, because you're not dealing with someone who's going to fight with you because they're court ordered there. So they've come in on their own accord and they really work the program. Obviously you get some that don't, but you've got most of them are really committed.
Okay. And what are they like to deal with? What are the kind of things that happen in the consultation? Talk us through a typical consultation with a client.
Okay, so normally I just kind of let them know that I understand the road they've walked, that I've walked it as well, just so that they don't feel any shame. And then obviously I'll ask them, what's a day in the life of, say, with you, Dr. Raj, before you got here. So I can kind of gauge how much they were using, how much they were drinking, what it all entailed, and how it affected them. And from there on, I'll start working on coping mechanisms that I can fit into their aftercare plan. And if they want to do the 12 steps, we can look at a bit of that. We've got 3 options here of the different types of 12 steps. And yeah, then they make the decision and we sit and we get going. We've basically got 4 sessions with them. If they ask for extra, I'll put in extra. Otherwise, I have 4 sessions in 28 days with them.
Tell us a bit about coping skills. Give us an example of coping skills.
So what I try and make them realize is that obviously you're here in a safe environment at the moment. So there's nothing really, that should stress you out. A lot of them will say, I don't know if you're still there. Oh, there
yeah,
I'm
still here.
A lot of them will say, I haven't craved one since I've been here. And I said, well, that's quite normal because our responsibilities aren't really here at the moment. So for me, the coping skill is you need to realize that the world is going to slap you in the face when you leave here. Responsibilities come flowing back, temptations are flowing back. Everything that tended to before, the habits that you had before are going to be right back there at home again. So for me, it's important that they start realizing and getting it into their head straight away that I'm not going to drink again or I'm not going to use again, because it's a decision I've got to make and I've got to make it now. Plus structure and routine. A lot of them don't have and I think it's obviously since COVID a lot more, they've worked from home. So, they can get up when they want to, they can drink, they can, snort a line if they feel like it, and then do a little bit of work, and then do a little bit more of that or this. So it's important that they start gymming if it's something they want to do. Structuring routine for me is a huge coping skill. It kind of makes them feel safe, and they know what the day entails instead of, I don't know what I'm going to do. Maybe I can snort here, I'll call my dealer, I'll get that done, and no one will even know. So they need to realize that, life is life and it's going to go on, and it's still going to be life on life's terms when you leave.
So one of the things that a rehab unit or an inpatient unit like yours does very powerfully is it cuts the link with the dealer. It cuts the link with the supply. So that's a good starting point because you're far away and there's no way they can get at it. So it's a very important thing, even though they have mobile phones and computers, which is a bit unusual. Most rehab places stop that because they find that people use that as a way to get supplies into the
rehab.
Place. Yeah, I've had several clients who were like the ones you described, very resourceful people who like ran banks and stuff, and some of them ended up for various reasons I won't go into in jails in the third world, notorious jails, where they were surrounded by they're like murderers and stuff. And it was really quite amazing for some reason, and I think bribery was involved. The jailer would let these clients of mine keep their mobile phones. I mean, once you do that, that is just a disaster because with a mobile phone, you'll be amazed. I have had clients who ran banks from the inside of a jail just using a mobile phone, and also who've, organized parties, organized women of ill repute, to come into the jail, etc., etc. So anyway, but talk us through some of the worst stories you heard in terms of you said, tell me about a typical day. Give me an example of some of the worst days you've heard from some of the clients. Obviously, you have to anonymize it.
I think a lot of it would be when that it's really spun out of control, and that they've really hit rock bottom. So, it could even be prescription medication. For me, that's sometimes the worst because a doctor scripted it, so it should be fine. But you're looking at sometimes your Ritalin, I don't know what it's called overseas, Concerta, which we basically call, medical cocaine. And the detoxing is bad. Same with heroin. And they don't seem to realize it, and some people, Dr. Raj, and it's always going to be a debate. Is there a rock bottom for some people? And I've gone and done things that I would never have expected because the person I get to see is not the person that was in addiction. They've come here, they might have detoxed, and then I get to see them. So I don't get to know the person that was in addiction. But I mean, it's the same as what I told you. Put yourself in dangerous places, do stupid things, embarrass yourself. Married to men, perhaps they shouldn't be because it's really not a good relationship, but they'll stay because it suits them or, for whatever reason. So it's just actually quite sad sometimes that you sometimes know, they're going back to the same environment and it's not going to change. And they're not going to work to change that either.
And that's kind of crucial because at the heart of all psychiatric treatment, in my opinion, you've got to do something you don't want to do. That's really important. And they need to understand that. And it's the refusal to do the thing they don't want to do that's landing them in trouble. And they're hoping for a magic pill, a magic wand as a way out of avoiding. At the heart of all psychiatric treatment, there's something you need to do that you don't want to do. Do you agree with that?
Exactly. Dr. Raj, I can't tell you how, obviously our centre is beautiful and it is one of the top in the world. And, if I take a photo of the surroundings, you'd think I've come here on a holiday, but it's not. I think if I could tell you the emotional roller coaster ride that these clients go on, it would be a completely different story. It might look beautiful, and it is, and you've got time to go and reflect and do mindfulness exercises and things like that, because it's not, jail orientated like some of the rehabs, but they're working on themselves, and nobody wants to look at how terrible you've been or the stupid things you've done or, that type of thing. None of us want to do that. So for me, I think it's important that the world understands that we have, no matter how pretty it is or, where it's situated, that it's still flipping hard. It's basically, you've got to change yourself completely. You've got to learn who you are. I mean, I've got a little quiz that I do with some of them, and it's called the identity quiz. And I ask them certain questions where I don't ask them something with any emotions, and they can't answer it, like favorite color, favorite food, favorite destination, favorite car, and it's difficult for them to answer that because they don't even know that. So they've got to learn who I am. Like, what is my favorite color? I should know that. And then you can go deeper emotionally. But I mean, that's how far we've still got to go.
What about the fact that, let's go back to this point, that everyone needs to do something they don't want to do, and what they're hoping for is that you'll help them do it, that you will help them feel like doing it, right? You'll make it easy to do it. Whereas in my experience, and I'm interested in your opinion, and feel free to argue with me, basically, I'm afraid the hard lesson is you have to do it, and then you'll feel like doing it. You have to do it first. You can't sit around waiting to feel like doing it. You're going to have to do it despite the fact you don't feel like doing it, and then you'll feel like doing it. What do you think?
Well, no, I totally agree with you, and I'm so glad you asked that, because when I often do an aftercare plan, you'll see someone have written there, oh, I'm going to gym 5 times a week, but they haven't gymmed once since they've been here. And I'm thinking, well, what's going to change suddenly when you leave? Are you suddenly going to hit the gym when you've had, 28 days to at least try it? So I was thinking, wow, the gym is just going to pop out when you leave. So I think they've got to start changing in here already. For me, that's crucial. I want to see changes in behavior already. Before you leave, I want to see that you're waking up at a normal time. I want to see that you're eating your 3 meals a day. You're not rocking up for breakfast at 9 when it's actually finished and you should be in the morning meeting. Get up normal, get dressed, look presentable, come through, and let's start the day. Attend the therapeutic group. Because when you leave, I'm not going to be there. They say you can take the horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So we can give them the tools, and that's about it. The rest is totally up to them.
Okay, but I find you, and one reason I wanted to talk to you again, quite an inspiring character. I think if I was unwell, I'd want a therapist like you. There's something about you that is quite inspiring. And I want to talk about that magic X ingredient that most therapists don't have, no matter what qualifications. I've met many professors of psychiatry, very eminent doctors who are, let's say, the top of their field in psychiatry around the world. And they lack the secret X factor that helps people get better. And part of that X factor is that you have to be an attractive personality. You have to be someone that people want to engage with. And frankly speaking, most therapists are not, in my opinion. They're like people, you see them at a party and you wouldn't want to go and talk to them, right? You have to be an engaging person, right? Whereby like, there's something about them. There's something engaging about them, and you're a very engaging character. And the other thing is there has to be some attitude to the human spirit. I really feel a kind of overwhelming optimism and positivity about you. No matter what terrible thing I might confide in you that I've done, I just get the feeling that you won't run screaming from the room, and you'll be positive. And also there's something about you that is inspiring, that makes me feel, if I was consulting with you, that I could do a difficult thing, even though I don't feel. Now, what is it? What is this magic X factor? You can't train it in people. And do you accept that some people have it and most people don't have it who are in the field? What are your thoughts?
I think I've met a lot of different characters in the field, I must admit. And then I think, oh my word. But I think the X factor is that, sorry, I think because I've walked the road, and there was a stage, Dr. Raj, where I would say, Jane, I hope you don't wake up tomorrow morning, because if this is life, I don't want it. Okay, I didn't want to kill myself, but I didn't want to live that life. And I think I've learned to live, and I've discovered who I am, and I love to laugh. I cause nonsense. I'm just one of those people that I laugh a lot. And I love that. And the clients say they love it. They can hear me when I arrive in the morning, and they come running to say hello. And I just think it's because I've learned that dark side, if I can call it that. And now I get to be really happy. And when I laugh from my tummy. I don't just fake laugh, or I really, really do laugh. And I think it's always been with me. I just never learned that about myself until I hit, for me, I would call it a rock bottom, where life wasn't worth living anymore. And now I love it. So I think for me, it's great to inspire people. And I often tell them, I wish you could see what I see in you, because you can just tell me all the horrible things about you, but I don't know that person. I've met a completely different person. So it's good to be really honest with them about what you see and the positive factors, because they don't feel that.
Okay, but you're agreeing with me there's this magic X factor that exists, and you're agreeing with me, I think, that it doesn't exist in terms of diplomas hanging on the wall. It's got nothing to do with being educated at an elite institution, right? And you're also agreeing with me it's very, very rare. I mean, you're a cheerful therapist. Most therapists are not cheerful. I mean, and I do wonder to myself, why are they doing what they do? Because they just don't, they radiate seething resentment, in my opinion, most of the time. So you've agreed with me that it's rare, right?
Yes, I think, Dr. Raj, okay, I will tell you, I've got a couch in my office, like a real person, like a real therapist, and they can lie down if they want to. No jokes. I don't do that. But I think I just make them feel comfortable. This is not this is not like, this is not, let's sit and be very serious and I'm very formal.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, tell me a bit about you. I think for me, I need to gain your trust, and I need you to trust me. Yeah. And I'm not going to do that by making you feel completely awkward. Yeah. Or like a strange person, or a freak, or a bad person. So I don't know. I think I absolutely love my job. My happiest times of my day are definitely counseling. Yeah. I just feel like I've done something, I've tried, I've helped, they've left feeling better, they've left with a smile on their face, or something at least to think about going forward.
But this thing about making people feel comfortable at the beginning of the consultation, I think is really interesting and really important. So one of the opening lines that I do when I introduce myself, I always introduce myself and explain a bit about who I am. And there's a subtext. Like one of the things I say is, you may be aware that a psychiatrist has been to medical school. And hard to believe in my case, I know, right? So I'm making a little joke, and then I go, but I can actually prescribe medication because I've been to medical school. And that kind of like little banter intro is an attempt to help them relax and feel comfortable. Yes. And then I say, before I finish speaking and let them get on with it, I say, and just one final thing I want to say, most people find it enormously stressful coming to see someone like me for the first time, but hopefully it won't be quite as dreadful as you might imagine it to be. And they all smile because there's a kind of a release of tension that I've acknowledged the fact they're tense, right? And there's a release. By the way, it's very interesting. The nightmare answer you get back is when the client says, "Oh, no, I'm completely relaxed." I've seen loads of therapists. And then that's a slightly more worrying answer. Yeah, some people say that. Yeah. Or some people say, I've been really looking forward to it. I've been to see loads of therapists. I mean, that's not such a terrible answer. I'm teasing slightly. But anyway, so this thing about making people feel comfortable, most therapists, you meet them at a party, they don't make you feel comfortable. I mean, the very basics of human interaction, they fail at. What are your thoughts about that? I don't know whether you agree with that point.
I wanted to say, obviously, I thought about it a lot, and I have thought about it a lot because of the people that I've met. And I think surely you've got to have a bedside manner, an appropriate bedside manner, or at least a comfortable bedside manner, if I can call it that, if you're going to deal with people. Otherwise, you've studied the complete wrong degree. I mean, it's no use you wanting to be involved with people, but yet you are awkward and socially strange yourself. Okay, I'm not going to lie. I'm not normal myself, I'm sure. But I think the fact that as soon as they arrive at my office, they're comfortable. I'm relaxed. I mean, I'll just sit extremely relaxed and just say, okay, well, let's chat. Tell me a bit about yourself. Yeah. There's no, I'm going to judge you, or, let me make you feel awkward. Like you, Dr. Raj, I think it'd be great to come and see you, because I don't think you'd make me feel scared. Because, I mean, seeing a psychiatrist, you're like, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with me. I'm going to a psychiatrist. the same thing. It might be a rehab, but I wish it was called the School of Life,
Yeah.
the School of learning who I am.
Yeah. Yeah. But let's stay with this point, though, about engagement and people making people feel comfortable, and the fact that most therapists don't do it, and this bedside manner point, which I think is extremely important. The bedside manner doesn't get tested for. It doesn't get selected for. You don't get measured as to whether you have a bedside manner or not at medical school. And the other point is that basically you are required to be socially quite confident. I think you're a socially confident person. I think you're not afraid to walk into a party and go up and chat to a stranger, and I certainly am not, much to my wife's embarrassment. But anyway, my point is that
Me too.
that most therapists are not socially confident people. I mean, I wasn't always this way. I think I was very shy when I was at medical school, but now, I walk into a party of complete strangers. I have no problem at all just walking up to the first person and starting a conversation. And I just don't think most therapists have social confidence. In fact, I think they're at the opposite end of the spectrum. They're often quite shy people, I think. Again, what do you think? What are your thoughts?
No, I agree with you. I think, some of them, certainly the ones here, are quite confident and really easy to talk to. But I've met some, and I think you chose the wrong profession, or you maybe should have gone and worked in a cubicle, maybe, or I know that sounds rude, but if you're going to work with people, especially people that have an extremely low self-esteem and no self-confidence whatsoever, perhaps you need to show them that it's possible to gain it, and have the bedside manner. Because I never had self-confidence. If you'd seen me a few years ago, this isn't the Jane you would have seen. You would have seen like totally anxious person, really scared of life, scared of anything. But yet I always had this personality. It just needed to come out. And that's only when I got better and realized, hey, I can be Jane without being drunk. I've still got that. I can still dance. I can still have fun, and it is possible. You don't have to have the drink in your hand, because in South Africa, the culture is drinking.
Now, listen, there's another point I want to discuss here with you, which is we've talked about in a way that great therapists who are inspirational are engaged with life. I mean, you said you love life, you love to be alive, but you went through a very dark period when you were obviously, in one way of putting it, suicidal. But I think most addicts, my experience of them is that they have rather empty lives. And I think there's a connection between the emptiness of their lives and the addiction. I ask them what they do for fun, what hobbies or interests they have. And, it's just astonishing how empty their lives are. I mean, they often get into addictions because their way of passing time is hanging out with other people. And the social gregarious bit where they hang out with other people, or maybe they're anxious, tends to be a dangerous slide into drink, drugs, and so on. So what about that? Do you notice the emptiness of people's lives? Because I think therapy is also not just about stopping you drinking, but replacing drinking with something else, i.e. an appetite for life. You can't just not drink. You have to have something else going on in your life that replaces drink. And I think this is a great failure of therapy and psychiatry and psychology, which is it thinks that the solution is stop people drinking. No, the solution is they have to have a reason to be alive, whatever that reason might be, five-a-side football, whatever, that replaces alcohol. So there is a sense in which almost you have to be like the person in charge of sports or leisure activities at a hotel. You have to find something for people to engage with the world again. But again, what are your thoughts?
No, I totally agree, because obviously it starts off and it's a huge addiction, and then it becomes a habit. You walk in the house, you pour your wine, you sit on the couch, and you carry on, and you completely isolate from the world. Isolation is huge with basically most addicts that arrive here. They're not in the party phase. That phase ended long ago. It's I'm drinking by myself routines that no one knows. And for them they need to find a connection to someone else, in a sense, like learn to be around people. We encourage all our clients to have breakfast, dinner, and lunch together at this beautiful long table, because it teaches them to communicate again. They've lost that skill of almost, I can say something, I can be part of a group. No one's looking at me saying you're strange, and there's a lot of acceptance, which I think makes them feel better. And then again, obviously we've got the gym, which people were involved in and then became addicts and stopped. we are very fortunate to be in an absolutely beautiful part of the country where the Kruger National Park is not too far from us. So organize excursions for the clients to pique their interest in other hobbies and activities that they could still look at when they leave. Okay, obviously, naturally, depending where you live, but I mean, there's whitewater rafting, there's paragliding, there's, helicopter rides, we do mountain biking 3 times a week here, and we go on a trail, and we do nature walks. And these are all things that you could look at when you go back to whatever country you live in. Go on a walk, join a hiking club, join a mountain biking club. Start connecting again with what's out there, because you don't have to connect with your alcohol or your substance anymore. And believe it or not, the funny thing is, Dr. Raj, and I don't know, I don't have one addict friend. When I was addicted, that's all I had. And it just seems like, it's not that I don't look for them or want them in my circle. It just seems like I have a different circle suddenly that I've been clean. Whereas if you weren't going to drink as much as me, you couldn't be my friend before. But now I've just got friends, hiking. I've got 4 dogs, Dr. Raj, not children, dogs. So taking them hiking in beautiful parts of where I live, and just spending time, just being me. Like, I call it Jane time. Nice long baths, candles, things like that. Which before, if I did do them, I can't remember. In the good old days, can't remember. Probably did.
Okay, but I love the way you laugh about really quite dark things. I think that sense of humor you have, I won't come back to, because most therapists don't have a sense of humor, and I think it's missing in the mental health field. But look, you just described going for a walk up a mountain in gorgeous countryside with your 4 dogs and that's just a wonderful way to spend an afternoon, right? Why on earth would anyone instead want to sit in a living room and drink heavily or do cocaine or heroin or whatever, when the world has so much to offer that's much more interesting? So that, to me, is the deep question, because to me, addiction is not just a movement towards something, right? Chemistry. It's a movement away from something, which is the big wide world, which has so much to offer, right? So this turning away from the world is what interests me, as what on earth is it that induces people to turn away from the world in that way? So what are your thoughts about that point?
So, what I found is that it doesn't have to always be something traumatic that happens to turn you away from the world. But a lot of people might not be socially okay, so therefore lack confidence, but found that it's easier to then go on a drug to give them that confidence, and then it spins out of control. Or perhaps you've had something traumatic happen to you, and I say you either didn't have the coping skills at the time, or you hadn't learned them at that stage. So we need to go back and look what happened. What do you need to know going forward? So it's just so strange. It just seems like it's so acceptable out there. It's happening everywhere you go. And it's scary, because I think COVID did bring out a lot more of addiction than there was before, because people said they got stuck at home and then they lost connection with people. Like, Dr. Raj, I think a lot of me being happy are some of the people I work with. I mean, we have such laughs together, it's not even funny. We also eat lunch, dinner, and breakfast together, and laugh and cause nonsense and just have fun. And I think that makes a big difference, because if I sit alone at home, I get depressed. I mean, I wouldn't say clinically depressed, but definitely a little bit sad, a little bit down. Connection, I think, is the key. Stop isolating. Go and find out what's out there.
But what about you? You actually were engaged in the world. What's interesting about your story, you were this elite swimmer. You were competing at a very high level. So you were engaged, right? And then something happened where you couldn't compete anymore. Is that right? I think you had an injury.
Yes,
and
therefore, injury, yes.
Yeah, and then therefore a big hole opened up in your life, maybe, and which needed to be filled
with
something else.
Okay, I don't know if you're going to know the hole, but the hole that opened up became Hunter's Dry. It was a drink that I discovered at university, the cider. And obviously I hadn't been drinking, I hadn't been partying, I'd just been swimming. So the day that my injury happened was probably about 2 weeks, the day I was told I could never swim again, was 2 weeks before I entered university. And I was quite happy with that because I think I wanted to start a new life now. But obviously, I went a bit overboard, as we do at varsity, and then you get your first year syndrome and you go really fat and things change. But I loved university. There were finally subjects that interested me, in the psychology field and the physiology field and all the rest. But then I got married very young, and then I got divorced. And that was not part of my dream. It wasn't part of my plan. And that's also when I think the coping disappeared. Plus, I don't think I ever did cope with the end of my swimming career. I just covered it with alcohol and having fun at university. So for me, there's quite a few factors involved in why the drinking got out of control. I was at such a level, then I just was a nothing. Then I went to university, discovered alcohol, had fun. Then I got married, and then he left me, and then, then I was rejected and lonely. So it was a whole combination, if I look back now, to why it really did happen. And now I know, at least I know the signs to look out for me going forward in life.
But what about the fact that when people start to fall, as you were falling, as you began to drink and your life began to start to fall apart, that there should have been people around you that noticed you were falling and did something? Because there's another aspect to this which is quite interesting, which is that people can fall really quite heavily and no one seems to notice or do much. What are your thoughts about that? And it's a testament to the fact we live in a more socially isolated time where people don't really know what's going on in other people's lives. But what are your thoughts about that point?
So my family did notice I was falling. I think with a lot of drunkard phone calls that I didn't remember the next day. And that's why they moved me closer to them. So I was living in Port Elizabeth and I then moved to Joburg. But they did notice, and I then went to my first rehab, which was absolutely awful. I didn't know what to expect, but I nearly died. And then I came home thinking, oh, I've gone to rehab, I'm better. But meanwhile, I had learned nothing. I'd learned to sit around and smoke my lungs out, like we didn't do anything. And then I went to the second rehab where there were 7 women and 70 guys. And that was a bit of a strange combination. And then I went to the halfway house and I worked. But it wasn't, we also didn't really get coping skills there. And then naturally the third rehab, I went straight to the long-term rehab where I learned that, you know what, Jane, you can't run away. Mom can't help you. She can't save you. But every single time I was falling, my mother was there, even though I thought she didn't know. When you wake up and you check your phone the next morning, everybody knew I was falling, although I thought I'd hidden it very well. But you don't. That's where I think support comes in. But support not in a way that, oh, I'll give you a car because you went to rehab. A lot of parents do that. Or, oh, you did so well, I'm so proud of you, I'll buy you this. More like, well done, what do you need from us now going forward so that you can live the life you need to live? And we don't enable you anymore.
But isn't that partly because one of the other big problems here is families don't really quite understand the depth, if I can put it this way, of depravity of the addict, what they're willing to do in terms of lying or misrepresenting how ill they are when they're pretending to be well. And families fall for that over and over again, don't they? And as a therapist warning families that they need to be tough, I find this an uphill battle because families think you need to be kind to people with this kind of trouble or problem, and that's the solution. Whereas in fact, you have to be tough. Being tough doesn't mean you're being cruel, but it does mean you're doing something that is the opposite of what the family thinks needs to be done.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, yes, you've made a mistake, you've fallen, but I need to support you, but not in the way that I used to. I can't put you in a ball of cotton wool and hope for the best. You know, if I'm going to notice that your behavior is slipping or that there's an emotional relapse about to happen or is happening, I'm going to call you out on it. You know, but unfortunately, you get the addicts that a lot of them will take offense. You know, you can't, we're very touchy people sometimes. And not now, I'm not, but very personal, very sensitive. So if you just say, you know what, Jane, I don't know what's going on, but you spent the whole weekend at home last weekend and you did absolutely nothing. I've got no right to say, who the hell do you think you are? I should say, you know, you're right. You're absolutely right. I should have got out. I don't know what was going on in my head, but I wasn't feeling myself. It's kind of like we've got to be honest from now on out as to what's going on. And I mean, I work in an environment where it's filled with psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers, and they call me out if they're asked, you know, and I'll call them out if I need to. So I'm actually quite blessed, but the family, when I do their aftercare plan with them, I'll be your accountability partner. Who are you going to tell these signs and symptoms to? But I don't know if they do that. I mean, I really hope and pray that they do. But if my mother wants to phone and say what's going on, I'll have to say, I don't know, Ma. I've just been isolating a lot more than I usually do, and then I've got to pick myself up, put on my clothes, get out, and go and live. You know, and it is hard. Sometimes life is hard, but we need to understand that.
But families are often very frightened or wary of getting into conflict with the addict, so they tend to appease the addict, right? Whereas in fact, you do have to engage in conflict. And at an ultimate level, when the addict is out of control, they can't be in the house of the family. You have to say to the family, you can't have the addict live with you. And then they go, well, where's he going to live, or where's she going to live? And you have to say, well, that's not actually your problem anymore. It's their problem.
Exactly.
If they're not going to live in an acceptable way, if they're going to abuse you and turn up at 3 a.m. and then raid your bank account and so on and so forth, they can't live with you.
And there's no TV. Yeah.
Yeah, they can't live. Yeah. Where did this TV go? You know, exactly. So I want to discuss with you this point, because I find this very difficult when I say to the parents, you have to change the locks. If they'll go, well, they've got a key, and I'll go, we got to change the locks. And they think that I'm saying something, that I'm saying something really quite terrible. But this is the correct treatment. You've got to kick the addict out. Isn't that right? I mean, when it gets to a stage where they're completely out of control and you are frightened to have them at home. Would you agree?
Dr. Raj, I totally agree that the family needs to heal as well. In the sense they've been abused.
Yes.
If I can put it that way.
Yes.
Maybe that's the wrong word, but I mean, the addict is a very selfish person, and I'm agreeing with that because that was me, and it was all about me, and I didn't think at all I hurt my family. And if it means kicking me out and sending me out to a halfway house if need be after rehab, or some kind of secondary care if need be, then so be it. But at some stage, you've got to learn to stand on your own 2 feet, and your family's got to say enough is enough. Because they're also broken. I mean, I only realized the extent of what I had done, even though I wasn't living with my family, you know, after the fact. And even that was hard to accept. But I totally agree with them. I was a lunatic in my own way, with thinking they didn't know, but driving drunk, having car accidents, and then finding out the next day, and me making up a lie why it happened, and you know, all these things that were totally unacceptable and kept them up at night. So when the final rehab I went to was when my family said, we're not going to do this anymore. So if you don't do it, we're not going to see you again. And I kind of needed that, but most people don't do that. They'll enable the addict as soon as they leave again.
Yes.
And then, you know, it's just a matter of time. I mean, I've actually said to one family, because the addict wasn't ready to leave, and I just said, well, I'm actually not going to have a session, but just choose another rehab before you walk out these doors, because it's going to be a week or 2. And it was exactly that, a week or 2, and then we're back in rehab because the family just enabled. You know, took them out early, put them, you know, that type of story.
Yeah, but okay, but let's just talk. We're basically saying, let's discuss this, because most people find this astonishing. If you kick the addict out, because you mentioned a halfway house, it is not your problem to find alternative accommodation. That the addict has to face the consequences of their decisions. That people are going to find that astonishing, that we're saying.
Yes. So, well, in the aftercare plan, I do sit and discuss with them. Obviously, depending which country they come from, because we've got a lot of international clients. London, I know a few places. Obviously, I won't mention, but some places that I often suggest. In Amsterdam, I've got 1 or 2 places. But obviously, South Africa, I know lots of halfway houses. But it isn't my responsibility. I expect you to go and research, you to phone the halfway house, and you to book an appointment or to book your arrival time and when you're going to be there. I also expect you, Dr. Raj, to find a psychiatrist and a counselor. So when you get home, that's not my job either. I'd like to see your booked appointment. I'd like to see what time when you're going to see them when you get back, that type of thing, because I'm not going to hold your hand. I'm not going to leave the gate with you. So best you start being a little bit responsible before you leave. I mean, it's really not that hard. Once you've done it, it's done, and off you go.
Yeah, but suppose the patient now, let's just torture this point a bit, has no money, right? The family should still kick them out, right?
Well, when does the family get to feel safe again? I know both sides now because I've worked with the both sides, and I've been the one that should have been on the street, it wasn't, and I've been the one that said kick them out. Only because if they really want help, they'll ask for it, until it has to come from them themselves. And you know what, Dr. Raj, I think the hard part is words mean nothing, absolutely nothing. I can say, I'm so sorry, I won't do it again. And tomorrow, and 5 minutes later, I'm doing it again. So it's almost like you need to see some kind of change in behavior, or I really want to do this. I can't live like this anymore. And then let the family try. And if and they don't try and they run away, or they do what they normally do, then that's it. I mean, at some point, when do you get to say, I can't do this anymore? I want to go to sleep at night.
Yes, but the family then say to me, okay, I advise them to kick the person out. And they then say, what happens if they kill themselves? And it's that fear they're going to kill themselves that keeps them being abused, the family being abused and having them in the house.
But Dr. Raj, whose choice is that?
Yeah, but that's a really terrible. Okay, that I don't disagree. That's a tough thing to say. Have you said that to a family? If this person kills themselves, it was their choice. You've said that? Because that's really tough.
Not in this particular environment I'm in now, but at one of the harder rehabs I've worked at, I've had to say, you are not responsible for their choices going forward. And if they kill themselves with an overdose, which many people I know have, whose fault is that? I didn't slip the needle up your arm. I didn't pour the alcohol down your throat. If someone did that, you're sure attempted murder. But basically, nobody poured any alcohol down my throat, not once.
Yes, but the family will say,
doing that.
Okay, I'm not disagreeing with you, but I'm just testing you a little bit because I think this is a real problem. The family will say, yes, but because we kicked them out, they then ended up killing themselves. If they'd stayed with us, they'd still be alive today. That's what that's the counter argument.
I always say, if you what if me, I'll what if you back. So, but what if they'd stayed and lived? I'm saying, but what if they'd stayed and died?
Yes.
Or what if they'd stayed and you died?
Yes, I agree.
There's always another side,
Yeah, you put it better than me. I say you think you're trading away risk. You're trading away risk by having them. You're not. You're just exchanging risk. There's a different kind of risk of having them in the house. It's still risky. It's very risky. It's not the case that it's devoid of risk. You're just not seeing the risk of having them in the house.
Precisely. I choose not to, or I'm saving their life, but I'm not. I might be killing them. What if they overdose in the bedroom in your house? Are you going to feel good about that?
Yes. Wow. I love the way you're really tough. You're very tough. But
I'm tough. Yeah, I'm not always that tough.
Yeah. But I'm not saying that like it's a terrible thing. I'm just interested in the way that you are being very direct, in the way that I'm direct. Now, the other thing that I see a lot of is particularly mums with difficult sons. I'm being slightly unfair here, perhaps, but anyway, I'm just going to go with it, where they do indulge and overindulge the addict son and the abusive son, who may even be physically violent to the mum, but they just refuse to kick them out. And all you could do is advise, and if you see a spiral into mutual destruction as a result, and you have to stand at the side of the road and watch that crash, that's it. But I think that's very difficult as a therapist, when people don't take your advice and the inevitable terrible thing happens. I think that's one of the toughest things as a therapist. So talk to me about that. How do you deal with that? Because I find that very difficult.
So Dr. Raj, and I know you're probably going to think I'm a heartless woman, but I've learned not to. I can't take everything personally, and it's my fault. If I said to the mom, please don't take your son back in, he's beating you up, it's not correct, you deserve better, and she still does, I can't take that home with me at night. If I'd said, look, let him stay there, if it gets to a certain point and he beats you and you've got a concussion, then I'll take responsibility. But I'll never advise anyone to stay in an abusive household. So maybe I've just got tougher from doing this and hearing so many horrible stories along the way of my recovery, and hearing, oh, this one's passed away, or this one's done this, or the mothers that I get on the phone. My poor so-and-so, does he need anything? Should I send him anything? I'm like, so-and-so's in rehab. So-and-so's fine.
Yeah. Okay. Now here's another dynamic that I see. The mum is overindulging the son. The mum's first husband has left because they got fed up with the whole thing, and now because she's a single. And then another guy comes on the scene who's a lovely guy and is a great boyfriend, but after a while he can't cope with the tantrums and stuff. So she's about to lose the boyfriend, right? All for the sake of the son, who's just a disaster.
Yep.
And she's going to really just sacrifice her life on the altar of a son. I see it again and again. And the boyfriend does and should leave because he can't cope with the thing. So again, what are your thoughts about that situation?
Mm-hmm. Again, I understand the love a mom must have for her son, but unless she's got an action plan in place to actually save his life, which she can't, it has to be up to him. Mm-hmm. I believe she needs to start living her own. Because
I agree. But what they then do is they go on a journey of shopping around lots of different psychiatrists. I give them advice. She didn't want to hear the advice. I said, kick the guy out. It's the only way he's going to get his act together. And then they go and pay for another psychiatrist and another assessment and another one and another one. And what they're doing is they're praying and hoping there's some magic tablet out there that will cure their son, when kicking them out is the thing that will cure the son. They have to do something they just refuse to do. So you have to stand by the side and see that crash.
Yes, and you'll find it as well. It's so irritating. I think to myself, there's no magic pill because I would have given it to you.
Exactly.
There's no magic cure, otherwise I would have done it.
Yes.
There's not even a magic word I can use to or click my fingers. Unfortunately, your son has chosen a life.
Yeah, but you have to do something. You've got to stop enabling.
Precisely. And unfortunately, the enablers and the rescuers are our biggest problems.
Yes, exactly. That's the point I'm making. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, they're forever going to jump in and save because it makes them feel better.
Yes.
And what life is that?
And now we're going to go very deep and very dark. Ultimately, that mum actually, oddly enough, is being selfish. She thinks she's being self-sacrificial, right? But there's something, and we know this term codependency, there's something going on whereby actually, at some deep level, does she really want the son to get well? Is there a sense in which the son's illness means that she is needed, and that in some warped way is playing itself out? Because actually the correct thing to do is to kick the boy out. It's the act of love. The funny thing is that's the act of love, because that's what's going to get him better. I want to hear your reaction to that point. But before I forget it, I like the way you agreed with me that what we spend a lot of time telling people is you're going to have to do something you don't want to do. I'm not hiding a magic bullet from you. The way I like to put it is I'm not hiding a magic solution under the sofa from you, right? It's not happening.
Yeah, my sofa. I would have used it.
Yeah. I mean, guess what? If I could save your son by waving the magic wand, I'd have got the magic wand out. You haven't seen the magic wand, therefore it doesn't exist. Hello? So anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. Then we wouldn't have jobs, Dr. Ross. You know what? That's what I see so often, what you just said now. It becomes the mother's job. It's her role. And I've seen it so often that, say the son eventually does get into a rehab, the mother is so lost. Her sole purpose seems to have disappeared. And that was to be there for the son that wasn't coping, that wasn't doing well. Now she's got nothing to look for. She's obviously ultimately taken on the role of caretaker in the codependency role. And now she's got to find something for herself. And then you're dealing with two issues now. The addict who's now finally saying, Mom, you've actually enabled me. They do get to that point if they actually get in. And Mom saying, well, I don't know how to live now because you were my purpose.
Yes. But look, I think one of the stresses of being a therapist is that the advice and the thing the other person needs to do, particularly the mum in this situation we're discussing, is blindingly obvious, right? And then they don't do it. And then they still look to you for an answer. You keep saying, look, you're not doing what I advise you to do. And as a result, this is not going to end well. And I think this is stressful because it's a bit like, as a surgeon, you have the ability to go in and take the cancer out. Okay. And the patient just refuses to let you take the cancer out. So you have to sit and watch the patient die from the cancer. And cancer surgeons don't have that stress because by and large, patients come, you say, I can operate on the cancer, take it out. No patient goes, let me think about it. Please take the cancer out.
Let let the tumor grow and I'll see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. And it's exactly the analogy of what we have to deal with a lot of the time. So I think that's very stressful. What do you think? And how do you cope with that stress?
Dr. Raj, it is stressful because I think you're in the industry, I'm in the industry, we have a heart for people. And if I could help every person that sat in front of me to learn to have the life that I've had, or that I've now found, I would do it. And it breaks my heart to see someone crying, but yet not willing to do what they need to do, or being enabled still by the person. You know, they'll come in and say, my mom phoned and she said this, or my father phoned and he said he's going to give me a job when I get home, and and a new car because I crashed the Porsche. And I'm thinking, what the hell? I mean, congratulations. You're going to crash that Porsche too in a few months' time. But for me, it is hard because I don't know if you can see it when you counsel, but I can sort of see those that are going to make it and those that aren't. And unfortunately, family dynamics has a lot to do with it. And I would encourage, I don't know what associations you have overseas, but we've got something called Al-Anon here and in various groups that I always say family members should at least go and find out. Go and that some of the groups have said to the family member, you should be sitting downstairs with the addict is, not upstairs here where the parent is, because they've just got a completely different issue. It's almost an addiction to them.
Okay, but I want to now discuss another technique point. I'd be interested in your opinion. You may run screaming from the room. I think the family that refuse to do this thing because they find it difficult are worried about getting into conflict with the addict. So I do a therapeutic move that is famous or maybe infamous, which is I say, blame me, right? Say, well, all we're doing is following medical advice. Right. We're just following the medical advice was, we can't have you live here. And we often... which has got a massive kernel of truth, that the doctor is very worried about our mental health and has advised us that in order to look after our mental health, you can't stay, right? So it looks like they're not making the decision, that the medical advice they're following, and it helps diffuse the tension because they can't be the target anymore from the addict, right?
Yes.
But that means that you become the target because the addict rings you up and go, what the hell? You tell my parents to kick me out, blah, blah, blah. And obviously you say, well, that's not quite what I said, but your parents have sought medical advice and they're following the advice. So you have to shoulder then the position of becoming the target of the addict, and that often leads to a breakdown in the relationship between you and the addict. But still, in my opinion, it's still the correct thing to do to save the parents, because it's a cascade of events that will eventually help save the addict, even though you're never going to be popular with the addict forevermore after that point. But anyway, what are your thoughts?
No, I agree with you completely. If I can save the parents and hopefully through that action save the addict, well, then we've done our best. I don't care if the addict doesn't like me afterwards. I mean, I would love, people pleasing is unfortunately still a part of my personality, although I do try to work on it. But I'm not there to please, I'm there to help. So if I have to say something you don't like, that's just how it's going to have to be. But I also often say, when someone, and this is maybe a completely different topic, but a lot of addicts don't have boundaries. So I'll often say, and they'll come and tell me, so-and-so is pushing my boundaries, so-and-so is doing this. So I would say, use me as an excuse and say, Jane said I need to practice my boundaries. So I'm going to have to say no on this one, or I understand what you're looking for, but I'm unfortunately going to have to say no. So it's a similar thing that you're also doing. You can blame me. I don't mind. And I do wear bulletproof vest to work and take an AK-47. So I'm fine.
So you realize that you are a target. That's what you're trying to tell me. You realize that you're a target.
Yeah,
I agree.
I don't.
But part of our job is to create the conditions whereby the parents are liberated, or the codependent character who's at the heart of the abusive relationship is liberated to walk away. Because often they can't do it themselves. They need help doing it.
They don't have boundaries. It's got to the point probably where it's impossible to set them at that stage. Yeah. Because the line was overstepped long ago.
Yeah.
So
okay. Now,
good for you for being brave and saying blame it on me.
Yes, but let's talk about something else now. I don't know what the regulatory framework is. We increasingly are burdened by regulation, by regulators who don't necessarily understand. I'm going to say something controversial. It's going to get me in trouble with the regulator. The practice of medicine or psychiatry. So if you say to the parents, please, you've got to change the locks, the addict is being abusive and selling all your possessions, etc.,
Mm-hmm.
etc. And it's dangerous because you've been attacked by the addict. Change the locks, and if the locks get changed and the addict is then found dead, right, several days later, the regulator
Yes.
could come after you, right, because the regulator doesn't understand the complexity of the situation. Do you face the same problem, that you're wary of giving this advice because you're worried about your regulatory framework, or do you feel confident that if things go wrong, you're not going to get into trouble with your regulator?
You're always weird because you don't decide because of advice you've given. And yeah, I don't know if the regulator would come after.
But for
After me
example, this
particularly.
prestigious clinic you work at will be in the news, right? There'll be a newspaper story.
Oh yes.
Patient at
Well,
private
yeah.
clinic drops dead, following advice of therapist. Okay, and it won't be good because it won't be helpful. I mean, do you guys worry about that kind of thing?
I think I worry the most about if this client or patient or whatever we have in our care is affecting those around them with their choices and therefore their behaviors. Because we've got 17 people here trying to get well in this facility, and it's not fair that one person's actions or unwillingness to get help or sneakiness or whatever you want to call it, lying, is still ongoing and therefore affecting the healthiness of the whole group. I mean, I can tell a parent you need to kick your child out if they relapse again, but that never does actually happen. At tougher rehabs we have worked at, yes, it has, but it hasn't lasted very long. But again, Dr. Raj, I can only go back to what if? What if they died in your house? What if they die on the street? What if they die in a shopping center? I can't say whether they'll live or die because I gave you the advice for them to leave. Because at some stage, if you're looking at, say, a heroin drug, it's not going to be long and they're not going to live. They're not going, that sounds terrible. It's not going to be long and the overdose might be in play because we don't know what's in heroin these days. Whether they've laced it with fentanyl or whatever the case is. So if you're addicted and you're that far gone that your family needs to now kick you out because you become abusive, I think by then you've got every right to say what you need to say to the parents.
Okay, so you're very confident in the way that you practice and giving this tough advice, but ultimately if we're giving this tough advice, often in conflict with the parents. We're telling them something they don't want to hear. You're telling the addict often something they don't want to hear. By and large, therapy, if it's done correctly, is you're telling someone something they don't want to hear, but they need to hear it. Now, what are your thoughts about that? Isn't that inherently stressful to be constantly, in a sense, I'm going to put it slightly dramatically, at war? It's a war.
It is a war. It's always a war, and it's always. I often like, oh my gosh, how am I going to put this now so that you actually get it, put it in a nice way? If I could say what I really was going on in my head, I don't think I'd be here. But I think an addict's always going to be at war because I want an easy way out. I want that pull that's under your sofa. I don't want to work because life on life's terms is too difficult. And I've often said to them, if I told you that this was your life, how you live here, day in and day out, every single day for the rest of your life, how would you feel? Okay, now this clinic, they're fine, but at some of the different rehabs, they looked at me like, I'll die. I said, no, you won't. I said, life is life. I said, do you think I want to go home and go to the shops and go and buy groceries and then go and make supper and then, I said, that's normal. That's life. It's not, I don't love it, but I've got to do it. So you've got to start realizing that, yes, some tasks are difficult, some are ugly, but you can put effort in and make it fun. I mean, Dr. Raj, you don't want to meet me in a shopping center because I most probably will talk to you just because I can. Even shopping can be fun.
Yeah, but this is a very deep point you're making. They don't want to do the work, and they haven't understood there will be work, and they think you're going to do the work. And that is one of the reasons it's a war, because all the time you are telling them, hello, there's work you have to be done. People come to me and they say, I've had several examples today, I'm not sleeping at night. And then the subtext is, give me medication to help me sleep. And you say, yes. let's find a non-medical way to help you sleep. And they fight back. And basically, they're refusing to do the work. And this is the central problem. Life requires work. Emotional problems require work. You're being beaten up by an abusive husband. You're going to have to kick him out. It's going to be work. And it's
going to be hard. It's going to break. Some part of you is not going to be okay for a while.
Yes.
But you just need to realize that it does get better. You
Yes.
know, hopefully, you know, I didn't want to go to rehab either, but I did it, and I cannot. I'll tell people, Dr. Raj, that I hope that before you walk out the gate here at the facility, that you'll turn around and look at me and say, Jane, I wouldn't change a thing because I'm so glad I'm the person I am today. And those are the ones that work, that find a new person, that find strength, that find confidence. If you don't want to do the work, Dr. Raj, what can we do? You know, you can give me sleeping medication, and then I'll obviously have to take 2 or 3 or 4 more because they're not going to work after 2 or 3 weeks. Then I'm going to find another psychiatrist. I'll go and doctor shop. And then poor you just try to help in the beginning. This client's now hooked on you know, sleeping meds or benzos. I don't know.
Yeah.
And so you did the right thing. You did the absolute right thing, because unfortunately I don't sleep well at night either sometimes. But that's life.
Yeah. Anyway, you're very good at putting it in a way that's endearing and charming and humorous, but also disguising the steel hand and the velvet glove, which is, I think, part of your genius. But Jane, thank you very much for talking to us again.
Thank you, Dr. Raj.
And just say the name of the clinic again that you work at in South Africa.
I work at a luxury rehabilitation center called White River Manor, Luxury Wellness Rehabilitation Center, White River Manor.
And if people want to come and meet you there, they can find you on the web. They can just type White River Manor onto the web and they'll find it.
Yes, they'll find it. We are quite at the top of the Google. So if they type in luxury rehab, we'll come up.
Okay. Jane, thank you very much indeed. I hope we can talk to you again soon. Thank you very much for talking to us.
Yes, I hope we do. Thank you so much, and best of luck going forward.